Sherry Fletcher, and this is your spiritual game plan. Change. It's something that happens to all of us. You've invested your time and energy into an important role, sometimes for years, and then suddenly it's time for you to move on. Maybe you've worked hard on a dream, and now your path is taking a new turn, but that dream isn't going with you. Perhaps you've raised your kids and they've moved on, but now your empty nest is filled with parent care. Or maybe you're in the middle of diaper changes and laundry piles. If you find yourself asking questions like, where do I fit in anymore? Am I even relevant? How do I find my purpose now? You are in the right place. This is the show for women in a season of transition. I believe that while your roles in life will change, your purpose is eternal. I'm here to help you understand just how intentionally you were made by a creator with a game plan. Together, we'll discover ways to help you unlock the purpose God's placed in you, develop a game plan for your life's calling, and embrace the intentional masterpiece you were created to be. Hi friends, today we're going to be talking about permission. When I hear that word, I'm often taken back to my childhood, hoping that my parents or my teacher will give me that go-ahead. When someone gives me permission, I find that I have more courage and confidence to take that next step. I was once asked how one could achieve more self-confidence. As I thought about it, I came to the conclusion that I don't think we can, and I don't think we're supposed to. We are told that we should not lean on our own understanding. And so having confidence in ourselves is something I don't think we can ever obtain. Especially when we are in seasons of transition. Trying to be confident in where we are headed is very hard. It's during those times that God tells us to surrender. He gives us permission to float, if you will. In this episode, I'm going to be talking with my friend Bethany Howard about her book, Permission Granted. She too struggles with the confidence to step out and share her passion, her words, and her purpose. Her book is fun, yet it's gritty. It's a compilation of poems that she wrote to help herself process all the areas where she found the permission she needed from God. And she's going to invite you in to take this journey with her. In this book of poems, Bethany wrote one for my listeners a few years ago. It's called Glory Bringers. She's going to read the poem to us, and then she's going to encourage us to feel the peace when we stop and float during times when we can no longer swim. Bethany, I am so excited to have you here on the Spiritual Game podcast. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Bethany, you were my first interview ever.
That's crazy.
I know, when I decided to take that leap of faith and push the go live button, which is the most terrifying thing anyone can do. It was with you, and we went live on Facebook, and I met you in the kitchen at Kathy Lipp's house a few years ago, and at that moment you were interning for her, and I was yet to be an intern. I didn't know yet that I was going to be an intern, so I got to do some interning with you and get to know you better. When I met you, I don't know if you remember what you were doing. But you were making the tissue paper all nice and pretty to put in the gift bags. And
yes,
it was funny because I came in the kitchen and I was meeting all these people, but you were so focused on that job. You're like, hi. And then you just kept doing the job. You wanted to make sure it got done.
I did. I was like, give me a task and I'm gonna make it happen. It was a busy place. All good things happen in Kathy Lipp's kitchen. I'm convinced.
It's a place to grow for sure. Love it.
It's a sweet place.
I would love it if you would tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and God, how God has been using your ministry this year.
Well, I am in Atlanta, just outside of Atlanta. I've been married for almost 21 years, 3 kids that are basically all teenagers. We'll come back to that. I have a dog and a cat. My dog is my perpetual toddler. I apologize if you see her in the background or something. But yeah, and we did have fish, but they're actually across the street at the neighbors. A few years ago, my husband was just like, you know what? Nobody is paying any attention to these fish. And so he actually took them over there to their house, and nobody noticed for like 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah, our neighbors have the fish named Bear across the street. So we love our neighbors. But yeah, I've been, this year has been a little crazy, as it has been for everybody. And I've had some really great opportunities to make some great connections with people because of the book, and then also through being a guest on some podcasts. It's been such a gift to be able to just connect with people and be able to share my words in different, unique ways. And it's just been really eye-opening to just see what is out there and see what exists. And, you know, through all of that, I definitely feel that, you know, God has been ministering to me as well through all of that, and just, you know, continually meeting me where I'm at, and then also helping me to take up my space at the same time.
Yeah, I have found that to be so true with the people I meet on the podcast, how much of a blessing they are. And I always think, oh, God brought that person to me today. I really needed that. And so, like you. So
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
it's fun to hear.
it's been amazing. Every conversation I've had, I'm just like, oh, okay, I needed that. Like, I needed that conversation. I needed to hear those words. And it's been such a gift to be able to have these conversations with, yeah, amazing people like you who are taking up their space in their own unique individual way. And it's just amazing to see like all of the different ways that happens. It's very exciting.
Yes, very cool. So I like to ask a couple fun questions. And I'm actually, for the first time, going to ask a question of you that you ask of your reader in your book.
I love this idea. It's so crazy.
So in your book, you ask, if there were one area of your life you'd like to show your most authentic self, what area would that be?
Oh, this is just so crazy. Like, this is the first time that someone has said, hey, I'm just going to kind of turn this around and ask you the same question. I think that one of the areas that I maybe need to step into is using my words in different ways, maybe than I've used them in the past. And this idea came from a training that I did with SUSY FLORY. She's an author, New York Times bestseller. And she was talking about how, I think it was, I don't know, it was at the beach or somewhere, but they were all together, and there's somebody like juggling chainsaws that were on and were also on fire. And she's like, you can't look away, you know, when something like that is happening. Like, everybody's in awe, and they're like really tuned in, and they're watching, and they can't look away. And she was basically challenging us to use our words in that way, to show up in such a way that people have to listen, that they can't look away. And so I felt this challenge from her, and I've come back to this a couple different times, just to be dangerous with my words and to kind of live on the edge with my words, because I have ideas and I have opinions and I have truth that I believe to be true with all of my being. And so I have to use my voice. I have to stand up for what I believe in. And sometimes that feels scary, and that is dangerous to me as a 9 who loves comfort and calm and predictability and the known of all of the things. I don't like unknowns. And so I'm definitely feeling this call to be authentic in the idea that I have ideas and I have passions, and I need to be sure that I'm using my voice for all of those things.
I like that. The chainsaws. Ooh.
I know, right? And it's not so, I mean, in that instance, for part of that, like the guy that's juggling is saying, look at me, look at me. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm not coming at it quite the same way. But I do think that we have to take up our space in the ways that are unique to us. And I'm not doing it so that someone looks at me, but I'm doing it for the good and for the glory. So it's not about me, but it's to point people into another direction. But still, I think that God can use us, like right where we are, to point to him.
I like that. That's awesome. So one question I ask everyone is, looking back in your life, how far back can you see the very purpose you are living out today and who you have always been?
This was like so fun to think about. And I do think it actually goes pretty far back. And I can recall, actually, just recently, I connected with a friend that I had in like second, third, fourth grade. I found her on Facebook. I just one day was like, oh, I wonder if I could find Shauna on Facebook. And sure enough, I found her, which is bizarre and crazy, but I did find her, and we were talking, and she is an artist. She's a painter. And I said, oh my goodness, like we're both creatives. Like, that's so cool that we're both creatives. I said, my medium is words. And she said, oh, I'm not surprised. And I was like, really? What? Like, why do you say that? And she said, well, you came over for a sleepover and you brought a book bag full of books. I was like, really? And she said, yeah, you brought a book bag full of books. I'm not sure, like, did I think I was going to be reading there the whole time? I don't know if I was just sharing my favorites. I don't recall, but that was one thing that stuck out for me. And then another memory I have is middle school. I put together this folder. I cut out all of these like comic strips or little comics and some encouraging words. And I put them all together on these different pages and compiled it into this folder. And I just kept it with me in case somebody was having a bad day. And then I could just kind of slip them the folder. And I don't know where that came from. So part of this encouraging thing has, I guess, always been there, has always been with me. And I do remember offering it to a teacher to look at. And I'm not sure what prompted that. like thinking is like, was she appreciative of me like saying, I think you're having a bad day, like, here, look at this folder? Or was she like, oh my goodness, like everybody knows that I'm struggling, and this student just said, here, you're having a bad day, look at my folder. So it is interesting to me that I've always been I've always loved words, whether it was curling up in my parents' bed and reading a book under the electric blanket, or whether it was writing a song. So it's just been interesting to me when I look back that, yeah, this has always kind of been there. How about you? Like, have there been things that you're like, oh gosh, I could point to that and say, yes, this has always been there?
Oh yeah, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, and if there isn't an event to go to, I'll plan one.
I love it.
So even though I was educated in the dental field, if I look back, I was literally planning, I was gathering kids in the playground to put on plays. And we put on plays. I was also gathering neighbor kids to put on neighborhood fun fairs and parades, just always gathering people for an event and putting things together for events. And it just, I see that all so clearly now that I look back and go, what is it that I love to do? And I'm like, wow, I've always been doing that.
That's amazing. I love when we can see those like fingerprints and those signposts, like, oh no, this has always been with me. It's something that's always been there, and maybe it was put there on purpose.
Yeah, that's why we don't always need permission. It's always been there, right?
Yes.
That's what we're going to be talking about, which is your new and your first published book.
I love how you say that. Thank you.
It is called Permission Granted, Embrace Who You Are, Cultivate Courage, and Impact Your World. And we were talking a little bit about this before we hit record, and how important it is to understand, like we just said, the fingerprint in God, because in order to impact the world, we've got to be authentic and we've got to remain who God created us. So I would love it if you would share a little bit of process with us about the title and your message of Permission Granted.
Yeah, Permission Granted, it took me a while to land on it. And I think that, I mean, that's just part of a process sometimes as a creative, like, you know, there's some things, as you know, that you land on, you're like, oh my goodness, yes, this is it. And then there's other things that it's just a process. It's a growth, it's a journey. And I definitely think that that's the case with Permission Granted. And it came about actually from a piece I wrote about my dog, how she doesn't like to go outside on her own. She needs somebody with her. She needs company. But when she hits the grass, she is running like she's created to. She is firing in all cylinders. There's joy, there's passion, there's fun, like it's all happening, but she doesn't want to go it alone. And that's me. It hit me that I was like, oh, I am my dog. Like, I sometimes need somebody to help me get to where I'm supposed to be so that I can run like I'm meant to. And that's okay. And so I have permission to not have to do this on my own. Like, I can link arms with somebody, but also I don't have to wait for permission. I don't have to, you know, I would just watch my dog just stand in the kitchen with the door wide open and stay right where she was, rooted, will not go out. And I don't have to carry that with me. I don't have to have that fear or that, you know, that uncertainty that keeps me stuck. And so Permission Granted was just kind of like this, the essence of all of these things, the essence of my message, what I'm wanting to invite women in particular into. And so it's been something that I've realized that is for myself now, but I'm also writing to the Bethany of 5-10 years ago. I'm writing for her, and I'm inviting her and also anybody else that hears it. But it's really bizarre sometimes how I write something and it's for me, because I still struggle sometimes waiting for permission or allowing fear to keep me stuck, even in the process of writing the book and putting that together. For example, when I was supposed to buy the 𝗧𝗵𝘁 code, you know, that's on the back of the books, the little barcode thing. Yes. I drug my feet on it for weeks because buying it meant this was happening. Buying it meant that I was saying, no, I'm putting a book together. Am I really? Am I really making that happen? Am I really doing that? And so I just kept dragging my feet. And my husband one time was like, what's going on? like we've got this all planned out. Like, just hit submit, like just go ahead and do it. And so I finally did. But so even in the process of putting a book out about how we have all the permission that we could ever need to step into what we're made for. We don't have to wait for permission from anybody. It was granted at birth. I still was fighting it. I was still like, oh, well, I don't know, maybe this isn't really what I'm supposed to do, in the process of putting a book together about Permission Granted. So it's something I will probably always, you know, have to fight through a little bit. And that's okay. And it's okay that I need those reminders. Like, I think that's it. Like, we forget that we have permission granted. And so I'm constantly looking for reminders. I'm really clued in and tuned in to, okay, oh, I don't have to wait. I can move. Like, I've already been, the permission slip was signed a long time ago, 43 years ago. And so I just have to move into the giftings and what God's called me into.
Love that. So what I find interesting when you say this about, you're writing a book about needing permission and then not wanting to even hit the submit is, the enemy, he has a plot against the very plan God has for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's going to constantly tell you, you don't have permission, because that's where God has called you. That's where you're going to shine. Those are the words God's needing you to get out. And so that's, if he can keep you from that, he's not gonna tell you that, you're not called to sing opera. Well, maybe you are, but he's not going to tell you that all the time, because you're not inclined to go do that at the moment. You're inclined to tell women they have permission. So he's going to tell you, you don't.
Oh gosh. Yes, that's 100% so true. And I know that that's what's happening in, for other women. I know that that's what's happening in their lives. And I know that, those voices and the voice of the enemy can be really loud. They can be really strong and terribly convincing. And that's why I'm showing up. Like, that's why I'm using my voice in this way. And that's why I'm saying, I'm calling out to women to listen to those other voices that are there, to those other voices that, can be louder than doubt if we choose to listen to them. But sometimes it is, I need to redirect my heart. I need to redirect what I am listening to, so that I can hear those voices that are calling me into what I'm made for.
I love that. Redirect. And yes. So like I mentioned, you were my first interview. And what was so special is, for that interview, you wrote a poem specifically for my listeners in regards to being in a season of transition. And it's in your book. The title of it, yes, the title of it is Glory Bringer. I would love it if you would take the time to read that poem and then give us a little insight into how we can trust God while we're in a transition and do as you say and float.
Yes, I would love to read this. Thank you so much. This is called Glory Bringer. Transitions undo me every time. They test my endurance, challenge the strength of my faith, and leave me treading water in a sea of questions. Is this what I'm supposed to do? This is different from what I've done in the past. Does that negate my previous chapter? What about others who make different choices than I do? Am I making a wrong decision? Is a new chapter even necessary? I am sinking. My legs are tired. My arms ache and my lungs scream. And so I stop. And to my surprise, I float. I rest. My heart relinquishes its focus on survival so that I can just be. I am a glory bringer, even here, in the floating, in the journey that takes me to where I'm supposed to be.
Oh, okay, we're done. That's it. It's just even so relevant to me right now.
Oh, same. Like, I'm trying not to think about it too much, because I'm going to end up crying on your podcast.
Oh, you can.
I feel like, and it's amazing how something you write so long ago speaks to you like now. Like, it's crazy to me how that happens. But floating is surrender. And that's the hard part. Like, that's what I wrestle with, I think, so much, because it means I don't have control. It means that I have to give up my fight for control. And I'm not always floating. I don't always choose floating. Sometimes I'm thrashing. Sometimes I'm, trying to build a boat. Sometimes I'm trying to make land where there can be no land. So floating is where I surrender, and I allow God to care for me there. And it's the way that I trust him. And it reminds me that, I'm in good hands. I don't have to be looking, for land or trying to swim, the ocean to try to figure out where I'm supposed to be. I can float, and I can rest, and I can surrender to where I'm at, even if it's a hard place, even if it's where I don't wish to be. but that's God meets me there. He's not going to leave me. He's not going to leave me there. He's going to help me out.
I love that. Floating it's a Sabbath. We were created to have a Sabbath rest, and we are actually able to, if we could float, then we can continue swimming. We can continue treading if that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
But just taking that float, but the visual of just and stopping, and when we stop, we do float. God is still holding us up. So that poem is so wonderful, and so thankful for that. So I have a confession to make. I'm not usually someone that'll just pick up a book on poetry. Now, as a kid, I loved to write poems.
Yeah.
But I don't, I'm not drawn automatically to a book of poems.
Sure.
But what I love about your book, well, it's not chapter by chapter. I can open it at any time and just read whatever I open up to.
Yes.
And so it's like, if I just want something to think about, and I can just open it up and read what's right there. But what makes a difference in your book, I just love that you ask questions after the end of each poem. So it forces us to kind of go back maybe and dissect that poem from a different perspective with these questions. You leave a place for journaling where we can make notes. You put permission slips in there. It's very, very thought out. It's very, it just causes people to reflect and really join in that poem with you. And one of the poems that I really liked, I liked a lot of them, but I mean, this one I thought, wow, this is really profound. It was called A Turning From. And I would love it if you would kind of share a little bit about the meaning of that poem. And then again, ask and answer the question that you have at the end of that one.
This is such a good work for me. Like, I haven't sat down and gone through the book as a reader, and not just the writer. So it's been really fun to kind of have this opportunity. So thank you for that. Permission Granted is gritty. I initially, I think it started out as, buy the shoes, eat the ice cream cone, like, kind of a little bit more fluffy stuff. And the tagline is be who you are right where you are. And that is very much true. And I believe that we are called to that, but we are also called to grow, because we can't truly be who we're meant to be if we just decide to just stay who we have always been. And we're called to change. We're called to growth. And so Permission Granted is also for those opportunities that we have to step into challenge, to step into growth. Like, we can sit down and look at our lives, ourselves, and ask hard questions. And so Permission Granted gives us a chance to kind of like dig into that and really, get a little bit introspective and say, okay, maybe what's not so great right here. Like, this keeps happening. This is the same cycle again and again. And I keep ending up in the same place, feeling the same things, like, kind of what's going on? Why does this keep happening? And I really felt like I needed Permission Granted. I also say is for everyone. And so if it's for everyone, that means we have to help each other out, and we have to meet people where they are. And as we're taking up our space, not step and impede on others' spaces. And so the way that we take up our space should empower others to take up their space. That's the whole premise, the whole idea of Permission Granted. It's not just about me, doing what I want to do and just making it all about myself and Bethany. That's not what it's supposed to be for. It's supposed to be the way that I live impacts the world, impacts others' lives, so that they are also thriving and taking up the space that they're meant to take up and pursue the gifts that God has given to them. So Permission Granted allows us to, really look at where we're at and where we need to grow. And, sometimes we're tempted to think small and we make excuses and we say, well, this is just who I am. And Permission Granted doesn't let us get away with that.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed, like even with that a turning from,
Mm,
I hadn't really thought about what I needed to, what I do need to turn from, but what I avoid, you
mm,
know,
yeah.
and it was kind of hard to sit down and go, okay, what do I avoid? What do I turn from? And like you said, do that evaluation. We don't often do that, especially if it's a hard topic, a self evaluation. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm employed, I get evaluated, and my kids love to evaluate my parenting skills clearly and tell me how I'm doing and how I'm not doing. But
Uh-huh.
but I like how you said in the poem, our world depends on it. Our world depends on us to take a deep look at what we avoid turning towards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, like you said, I like how it's gritty. It is.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a good question for me to look at. Like, what am I avoiding? And it's funny because you were just talking about your kids, and I kind of feel like that's where I'm at. Like I'm at this new stage. It's a transition. And I guess as a mom of young kids, like I kind of felt like most of the time I kind of knew what I was doing. Sort of like, if somebody cried, I had a good idea of what was going on. Or if there was a fuss, I kind of knew how to figure it out. I just felt like a little bit more confident, and I'm feeling not confident with three teenagers. And it's just like, you know, weighing into that and wading into that. And I feel like I need to kind of turn towards that actually, and just sit in it and just kind of realize what it is, and what I need to learn, how I need to grow, what do I need to change, the way that I'm interacting, what words do I need to not use, or it's just been a really I don't know, it's been hard. It's just been a hard realization that I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing right now. So if you have any advice,
I was going to say, I don't want to sound discouraging, but I don't know if we ever do.
I know, It's just, but that's actually, in some ways, that's a good place to be, right? Because that's, I'm listening, I'm paying attention, I'm, I'm waiting to be led, maybe more, instead of just like, oh, I got this, I know what I'm doing. So yeah, it's just, it's been coming, like the signs have all been there, but I'm just kind of really realizing, and I grieved that stage that it's over.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I hear you. I grieve the teenage years right now.
Yes,
Now that mine are
yes.
grown and gone. One thing I was thinking while you were saying this is this you saying this and being able to even say this to your children
Mm.
and to be able to show them, hey, I don't have the answers. We're
Yeah.
doing this together.
Yeah.
I'm learning, you're learning. I do have an authority on what happens at the moment, but so many times I think back to the type of parenting. Again, no fault on anything that I was parented. If my mom's listening, you're an awesome mom. But it was like, because I said so. Why? Because I said so. And
Yeah.
and I think that might play a role in some of the permission that we feel like, well, maybe I'm not going to do it right, or I'm not going to do it. Mom always had it together. Mom knew what she was doing. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes.
But being able to say, hey, I avoided this because I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know how I would do it. I was the dog with the door open, and I didn't know what to do when you were doing that. So I just stood in the doorway.
Yes.
And having our kids be able to go, oh, okay.
I love that. Yeah. I needed that reminder that I have permission to show up and not know all the answers, because that we all are there, right? But we all pretend like we know what we're doing. And so I think that's a really great reminder. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. So the two questions after that poem about a turning away, is that the right? Did I say it right?
Yes, a turning from.
A turning from. Like, what's the title of the thing? Okay, yeah, a turning from. So one of the questions is what are you, well, we already answered, what are you avoiding turning towards? And so the two practices that I feel like I'm leaning into to help me develop permission granted when life presents challenges. I've realized that sometimes when I'm coming up against a challenge, when I'm feeling uncertain, when I'm feeling a little bit unmotivated, like I want to just stick my head in the sand and kind of just be happy there. I stop and listen to the words that I'm telling myself. Like, what am I saying? And sometimes it's, you can't do this. It's too much. Who do you think you are? Why are you trying this? This is stupid. Like those kinds of things. When I'm hearing those things, I need to pause and say, why? Like, what am I scared of? What am I fearing? What am I trying to protect myself from? And so that's kind of been, I'm realizing that's like a sign for me to pause and kind of ask those questions when I'm hearing some negative self-talk. Where is that coming from? So that's one practice. And the other practice is just remembering what God has walked through with me, what he's brought me through, how he's shown up time and time and time again, every single time. So those are two practices that I use when I'm in a challenging situation, to know that I'm not alone and that I don't have to fight and struggle through it. I'm going to be helped through it.
Yes, I love that too. Checking out God's credentials.
Yes.
It's like, look what he's done in the past. Okay, he can do it. So on the back of your book, you say, we were created on purpose for a purpose, and that this means the permission we often search for, wait for, and hold our breath for was actually given long ago. And that's my lingo. You know that I just love that. And so you and me, we have this message that we want the listener to fully grasp. And that is that, you know, we were given this long ago. This is Ephesians 2:10, which means, you know, you were a masterpiece. And I don't know of any creator, even a person that's going to do a landscape or any kind of creation, that they don't have an idea for it as they're creating it, as they're putting it together. They didn't create it and then bring all the plants to the bed and go, now rearrange yourself and figure out why I brought you here. It's so, I love that, you know, God is like, I've thought about this. You had a purpose before you even understood that concept. It was, you know, planted for you long ago. And so as we close, I would love it if you would, you know, give our listener just something to take away today regarding that they have permission.
Yeah, you have passion, purpose, and possibilities that were gifted to you at birth. The gifts that you possess have a place in this world, in your community, in your house, and in the world at large. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You have permission. It was granted long, long ago. So now you just step into what you're made for and take up your space.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was so much fun to have this time with you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's just a blast to talk with you every single time. I just love our conversations.
I hope that you enjoyed my time with Bethany. I love how she challenges us to think bigger and to stop saying things like, this is just who I am. Once we know that permission has been granted, we can't get away with that kind of thinking. Have you asked yourself what it is you avoid and turn from because you think it's just not possible? When we lean on our Heavenly Father's words and His promises, I believe that we will find the confidence we need in Him to take that next step. Or we can find confidence to just float and let Him guide us a little longer. Either way, permission has been granted. Bethany Howard has a passion for words. She will tell you that she used to be fearful of learning, but in recent years, she runs towards it as she has learned more about God and that she is more than the roles that she fills. Now that she knows she has permission, she does brave things like self-publish a book and takes fear on the ride with her. To learn more about Bethany and where you can get a copy of her book, check out the show notes or go to BethanyHoward.com. Have you subscribed to this podcast? If not, please do so. That way you do not miss any up-and-coming episodes, and I value your feedback. When you leave a rating and a review, it helps to get the word out about the podcast. It also lets me know how I can continue to serve you. During today's episode, did a friend come to mind who you know would be blessed? If so, I would love it if you'd share a link with them. Listeners like you sharing links with others is how this podcast can reach more people. I'd love to hear from you. Ways to connect with me are in the show notes or simply at sherryfletcher.com. Thanks again for listening to Your Spiritual Game Plan, the podcast that shares God's plan and your purpose in it.